Juliana Brooks take a look at the female perspective on this issue. Stay with us. Welcome to an interview with Juliana Brooks. We are so lucky to have her today to talk to us about the criminal thinker from the female point of view. And we've been spending some time with Rick Berenger talking about criminality from a male perspective. So I thought we'd take a few minutes with Juliana and get another perspective. Juliana, thank you for being with us today. And I wanted to get some input from you about how it is for women who have experienced the criminal justice system, what kinds of, what's your experience in terms of their thought patterns and their backgrounds, whatever you could share with us.
It's a pleasure to be here today. For women, of course, sociologically, they're different. Society treats them differently. As far as their thought processes, and speaking about the criminal thinking process or cognitive restructuring, actually the thought process itself is not that different. It's the behaviors that are manifested as a result of that thinking for women differs than for men. And those differ in, probably some obvious ways and maybe not so obvious, but some of them may look like, with men, maybe more overt violence, and with women, maybe more covert violence. And what I mean by that is some self-destructive patterns. We look at chemical dependency, eating disorders, sexual acting out, theft and prostitution, which you also see with men, but more dominantly with women.
Let me interrupt and ask you, what, in your experience, is the percentage of women who enter the legal system as a result of drugs and alcohol?
A large percentage. I would say over 80, probably closer to 90.
Wow.
And when you say related to drug and alcohol, that's important, because not always do we pick up that it's a drug or alcohol related crime. It could be prostitution, but the woman herself has never had any sort of drug treatment or, never had any interaction with drug and alcohol recovery treatment systems.
Okay, so maybe we can sometimes be attributing a female crimes to the wrong cause.
Yeah, the whole theory comes from a couple of researchers, Dr. Samuel Yogelson and Dr. Stan Samanow, and they would say that, based on a couple of their books, one, The Criminal Thinker, and another one called Before It's Too Late, they would say that, is it really chemical dependency that comes first, or is it the irresponsible thought patterns? So there seems to be some kind of question, and are people actually capable of accepting or embracing a recovery, especially that 12-step model, if they're not open-minded and their thinking is restricted so they can't accept new concepts? Do you understand what I'm saying?
I think so.
Okay. So, I mean, if someone comes into a 12-step program and has closed thinking and, is not connected and doing all the things that are really classic for a criminal thinker, they're not going to be able to hear anything. So for our first task as change agents is to open their minds.
And how would you do that?
And that's what the whole therapeutic approach to working with criminal thinkers is about. It's a process of confronting their thought process, confronting and intervening on behaviors, having the client become aware of their thinking through what we call a thought journal. That's daily, done several times a day. So you're intervening, confronting, holding the client completely accountable.
Do you see any differences with women going through this treatment process than men?
I do see some differences, but in my experience is limited, so I need to
Okay.
say that. I see some different manifestations of the acting out behavior once they're intervened on their
Okay.
tactics and thinking errors. And men will be more, like I said, overtly aggressive about you pushing their buttons and getting in their space, and women are more passive aggressive about it, more covert, more underground. And I tend to think it's more because that's socially acceptable for women to be that way.
Yeah, it is not socially acceptable for us to be overt with our anger. That is for sure. Now, I would imagine, too, that a lot of the difficulty that women have may also be linked to the relationships they enter.
Yes, and good point. I'm glad you brought that up, because one of my specific areas of interest is looking at the criminal thought process and its impact on the family system, and how codependency so much mirrors the criminal thought process for women that are involved with a man who's, let's say, a criminal. And that word has so much attached to it that I really want to say, to people who are listening, if that really brings up a lot, that's okay, because the word criminal is attached to a lot of things and pushes a lot of buttons. But for a woman who's involved with a criminal, she almost does the same spiral as a codependent involved in a chemical dependent relationship.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and the siblings are affected in a very similar but more profound way, in my opinion. So yeah, to look at how women in relationship with a criminal thinker are affected is pretty fascinating.
Well, I want to thank you for being with us today. It's very interesting, and let's rejoin Rick back in the studio.
Okay, Rick, we got a chance to hear about this from the female perspective. We got to hear about what a relationship might look like with a criminal thinker. Can you add any more to what Juliana shared with us?
Well, I really agree with what Juliana was saying about the codependent issues, because I work primarily with men in an outpatient setting that are on parole. And oftentimes they'll ask to come in and they'll bring their spouse with them. And in the course of the dialogue, what I've found out to be absolutely true is what Juliana just mentioned, is a lot of codependency issues start coming up. In other words, what I'm saying is the wife will take on the role of trying to perhaps fix her husband, will buy into some of the tactics and errors in thinking that he displays about, being a victim, and what do you expect? Of course I'm not going to find a job, and give me some more time, and, getting back to the old being a victim of society is against thee.
Okay, so she can support that thinking. Let's go back to our next graphic, which as we move along the continuum, we take a look at somebody who at this point is arrestable and also irresponsible.
Okay.
Accepts responsibility only to a degree. Now, when we start talking about arrestable people, we talk about people who are not willing to accept responsibility at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so how do you get them to accept responsibility?
Well, again, it's a process. It's not an event. We have a saying in working with these people, and it's called the zero state, where the client maybe is down and out. Maybe they're in the county jail. Maybe they're looking at going back and doing another little bit of time, and they experience what's called the zero state. They feel worthless. They're down and out, and oftentimes, traditionally, people have been there to sort of boost them up and say, hey, pull yourself out of this, get on with life, you're a good person. And what we do is we don't encourage them to leap out of that. We want them to spend some time in there and verify the fact that, yeah, what you've been doing is out of line, and you've been hurting everybody in the world, and your effect on the whole world has a ripple effect in that your little bit of behavior, as you determine it to be minute, in fact, affects the whole world. So starting at that point and addressing that is the beginning of that process.
So rather than, like in traditional counseling, trying to raise self-esteem, trying to make them feel better, help them move through that crisis, one of the ways you intervene is to help people stay in that crisis.
That's right.
To really take a look at the consequences they've had for themselves and for others.
Exactly, and really all it amounts to is we're presenting them with what the truth is.
Okay. And sometimes their truth is that maybe they do feel confident in the sense that they have committed a number of crimes and have not been caught. In fact, I think it's true that most people who are incarcerated, it's not for their first actual criminal action. It's just maybe the first time they've been caught.
Very, very rarely, I think. I mean, there may be a person here and there that's gotten arrested for the first time, and it's just it happens to be, that's the way it is. But I think from the people that I've worked with, it's common on the yards of prisons for individuals to go around and boast about, you know, the number of crimes that they've done. And yet when you interview them, oftentimes they'll want you to believe that, geez, I just made this mistake one time and here I am.
And it's bad luck, I'm taught.
It's terrible.
Okay, let's take a look at the final graphic, which is the extreme criminal thinker. And this is a person who, at this point, is not readily going to be accepting intervention. I would imagine that they have a continual desire to commit crimes. Again, we see that they may view themselves as a criminal, but not really. Really, they're a good person. When they do have relationships, they tend to have focus or a desire for gain or profit. So this is the kind of person who's, if they're going to engage with you, apparently they're going to engage with you for some advantage to them, some purpose.
Well, that's really true. And in the course of interviews and working with this population, they'll want to portray a whole different image as who they are. And that graphic just talked about, you know, they really view themselves as good people, so they'll want to discount the nature and the effect of their crime by building up their self-esteem and hoping to impress the agent of change, which is really, you know, I'm basically like you. I've had some bad luck, and deep down inside, I'm a pretty good guy.
Okay. Well, we're going to need to close here in a few minutes, or actually a few seconds, but I'm basically a good guy. And I think for those of us watching tonight, we've had a chance to take a look at it and see just how close or how far we are away from that estimate. And if we're uncomfortable, in some ways, maybe that's a good thing, it sounds like. Well, please visit us again next week when we ask the question, why is our country so fascinated with spirituality right now? I'm Mary Crocker Cook. This is Bay Area Psychology. Good night.